Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. And welcome back to the English with Kirsty podcast. And I'm really excited today because I have a special guest. So I'm really glad that you're here. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Rita Prazeres Gonçalves in good Portuguese.
That's why I didn't do it.
You'll get there. And I work in languages. I have been in the language industry, business, service industry, whatever you want, for many, many years. I'm very, very passionate about language learning. And that's it. I do language services and I do language mentoring, which is like a little bit of a twist in teaching English in a very particular way. And I'm here with Kirsty because she's been a very relevant person in my life in the last couple of years. And we have been exchanging a lot of ideas and thoughts, and it has been great. So thank you so much for inviting me, for being here.
Yeah, and it's really good to have you here because this isn't our first interview. So anyone who missed the first one, I will add the link to our show notes page because you also have a podcast. Tell us something about that.
So it had been like a dream of mine to have a podcast ever since 2014. I know it's pretty sad. Then it took me 9 years to get started. But yeah, the original idea of having a podcast, but I didn't know any details or anything like that. I didn't have an idea. I knew I wanted to talk to people in the language industry. That's all I knew, but I didn't really know what to do. So then years and years and years, I guess also things from a technical point of view probably got easier, right, in the last couple of years. And so I ended up getting to a point when I felt, okay, this is it. Now I'm going to do it. So, searched a few things here and there and came up with this very basic amateurish model that I use these days.
Very good,
I guess
model. Okay.
I guess for now I'm happy with it. And the idea is really to bring forward all the various or multiple possibilities in what comes to the path of people who work in languages from all those points of view. Copywriters, teachers, translators, all of those people are very interesting to me, and I think to everybody else, because we have like a fixed idea that people studied literature and then languages, and then they became teachers or they became translators, and sometimes it's just a lot of adventures in order to get to where people are these days. But I would say that the thing in common is that everybody started being interested in languages really, really early on in life. But other people obviously also had that, and then they moved on to other paths. But for people like us, it was inevitable that became our main activity and subject. And so I thought that this would be a good idea to showcase the multiple ways in which people find their path in the language business. So that's really the idea behind it.
And it's really good. So especially if you're interested in languages, go and check it out. I will add the link for our interview, but also the rest, because I've learned such a lot through listening to the other episodes and the other people being interviewed. And it's a good thing to do. So he's talking about that. And I think it's interesting that you said about, the path that people usually take, because when I was younger, I was told that if I like languages, I should become a translator or interpreter. If I don't want to do that, I should forget all about languages and never do anything with them. And I didn't want to do that. So I forgot all about languages and I did something else. But I guess for me, it started when we start quite late with languages here, when I went to high school and then started with French, which I was relatively good at, but didn't massively enjoy. And then German came next, which I enjoyed a lot more. How did it happen for you? What was your first introduction to other languages or to being interested in other languages?
Oh, God.
We're going there.
Well, also we started, now it's earlier, I think, but it used to be when you're about 11. So fifth grade, they call it. And then you had to choose at that time. It's not the same anymore, but it used to be between English and French. But like, I guess the vast majority, 90% of kids would just take English. And, that would be like a standard thing to start learning English when you're 11 or so. But for me, it was inevitable because of my love affair with Madonna, right? So everybody knows that my big interest in English really came from my relationship with Madonna. So I became a fan very, very early on. And it was like a vow that I took that I would learn English as much as I could so that I would be able to fully understand all of her lyrics, all that she did in the concert. So all that stuff. And that's how it happened. But of course, even before that, I guess everybody around me, my family, already knew that I was going to go into some sort of a linguistic path of some sort, because I was always very talkative and always very interested in the subject in general. And that was always my main activity, to talk.
It hasn't changed.
It hasn't, fortunately. So I guess people were expecting that from me. So nobody was ever surprised that I ended up doing what I do, because the whole Madonna thing made me want to get my English on in a groove much more than anything else. So I was just a bit obsessed when I was a teenager. I guess I used to like watch movies and then rewatch movies and series and all that, so that I could learn chunks of sentences and a lot of words. I would always bother my teachers with the questions about certain words that were more complicated, or because the dictionary wasn't clear enough for me and all that. So I ended up going to study some French too. And then I started at school, of course. And then I was so interested that I went also to have private classes. And then even German at that time, believe it or not, I did some sort of an intensive course for the summer for German. So hence my A1.
Things that may come in the future.
But my love for languages is not necessarily only for an applied point of view, right? So my love for languages is also to do with all the philosophical part of it, the physical manifestation of language. And that is why I studied linguistics, right? So I did not study languages, I studied linguistics. And that gave me like a window into the language world, which is pretty special, because it's a bit mathematical and it's very scientific, but it doesn't really go with my personality, I think. To think that I liked something that it was so much more into the science kind of thing. But it really was amazing. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. And the truth is that it's normal for me that I think about languages from all of those more universal perspectives in everything that I do. So that's what I love, thinking about languages, not only applying them, but thinking about the whole phenomenon and how they came to be in our lives, because it's really a human construct. But from my point of view, it has a lot to do with the divine. So this is why it's so interesting to me. It's like a culmination of all of my interests in life. Even the spiritual part is involved, the linguistic part is involved, the human part is involved. So all of this is super interesting to me, and this is why I live and breathe languages.
And which one specifically? So we have English. I mean, I know the answer, but my podcast listeners don't know you, so
Yes, it's true. So it is English. English is my number one thing. I do everything with English. Like, it's my main language for everything. It's all the jobs that I've had. I always say, they existed in my life. They came to me because of English. So I owe all my professional life to English. But then French happened because I was very aware that I was in love with all sorts of things related to terminology and lexicography, and the French are very strong in that domain. So there were a lot of materials that I needed to read. So really, while I was learning it, I was very active as a student, but then as a professional or as someone who's studying, it became a lot more passive. So I call it my silent language. Is something that I really enjoy. I love the grammar. I love thinking about it. I love knowing it and having it as an example. But the truth is that because there's no context for it in my life, so I don't actually speak it. So that's why I call it my silent language. So it's there. I'm always using it, especially in terminology jobs and things like that. But the truth is that I'm never speaking it. So you never know, maybe in the future. So I stopped talking French when I was about 16. So that was a long time ago, except for going to Paris some time ago for a presentation in a university and simply, getting into a cab and we started talking. So that's as far as
the
my
difference
French.
Between us. I didn't continue with mine. And when I went, what was it, 2019, I'd forgotten everything. I remember things about grammar that are useful now with learning other, like with Romanian, but and some words I still know what they mean, but I could not construct sentences now because I just didn't use it. And I think that's the difference between a language like English, which is part of your everyday life. You're not doing it for the sake of learning, you're doing it because it is part of who you are, what you're doing, what you're interested in. I think that makes a difference in terms of wanting to learn a language because you have to, and learning one because you want to, because you feel passionate about it, you feel it's something you want to know, something you want to know more about. And I also believe that having that perspective helps you to be a better teacher. Maybe you can, or not teacher because you don't like that word, do you? But how
because that's not what I am.
You're a facilitator, you're a mentor, you help others, but how does your own journey help you to do that in a better way? And what specifically do you do? Like how does it work?
I call it mentoring and not teaching or coaching or any other trainer, or like you call yourself. I love that you call yourself trainer. But it's just that I find that there's a lot of my experience that I put into it, right? As someone who learned English, not necessarily as an adult, but of course I was already not a small child when I started learning it. And if you start learning it at school, it's just a slow process, let's say, and the focus is really on grammar and you don't practice and all of that. So I guess I was, 13 or 14 when things really started happening. And so I kind of draw from all of that to present to people sessions. I call them not classes, but sessions, unpredictable sessions.
I can believe that.
That's what I do. So I focus a lot on conscience and intuition, right, to begin with. And I believe that most people don't know themselves as learners, and that goes for anything. But of course, I apply it to that specifically. So the idea is for you to understand, not going into the esoteric or divine part of it so much, but just from a more scientific point of view, where it is in your brain, how that has an impact in all your body, how everything you do has an impact in your language, and all the cultural things about you and around you and about the country where the language is spoken, and also the fact that we see it from our eyes with another cultural background. So all of this is intertwined, and I can always say that I don't know how they're going to end. Even if I try to predict a little bit how I'm going to start every time, I just cannot predict how it's going to end. And sometimes it's just amazing because we're just talking about anything that it's not even usually related to the subject that brought us together to begin with, but we just take it anywhere, because for me, speaking English is just something that brings me to life. And this is what I tried to, make people see and understand, and also maybe have an impact on the way that they have their relationship with the language. So I usually use my love for it, my passion, to just have an impact and show people how English can be a part of their everyday life in a pleasurable way, in a positive way, just by being themselves. So I guess that's what I try to do.
That's amazing. I want to come, but I don't need it for English. But when my Portuguese is so abysmal, then maybe.
Yes,
maybe.
So the idea is also to apply it to Portuguese class, to Portuguese mentoring sessions, obviously. So I'd love to do that. We have to have a session for you to tell me what you think.
I have to be a lot better first, but then definitely we will do that, because
don't worry, we can go from anywhere that you want. So you don't have to be, I don't know, I suppose you're already much better than you think, because you're always super modest about everything that you do. So I don't really trust you when you say that you need to learn
That's why
more
I'm
in order to
keeping you
do
away
this.
from my teacher. That I make
Yes,
sure
you haven't
never
said
meet.
anything. You're like, oh, no, don't come close to me when it comes to that.
I don't want you to see the caterpillar stage. You can see the butterfly, but not the whole kind of, because it's always like
I don't know that that's fair, but anyway.
Maybe not. I'll talk about that some other time. But
yeah,
I have this. It's interesting you talking about that, because when I do that as well in terms of using my experiences. I think everyone who's been following the podcast or LinkedIn will know I've been talking a lot about Romanian recently, like all the challenges that learning a new language from the beginning can bring, especially as an adult, because at school you don't care, right? As long as you learn the thing that you were supposed to learn for the test that you're supposed to have, as long as you're keeping up, it's fine. You're learning, you're following a curriculum, and generally you're not asked
not
to do
me,
things
but I
outside
guess.
of that. Yeah, well, maybe not me either, because I always did far
exactly
more than I needed to do. It was like I should have been doing something else, and I was learning some extra complicated German grammar rule that we were never going to be asked about in the exam, because I thought it was interesting, and it paid off because it's useful to me now. But I've forgotten where I was going with. Oh, as an adult, it's harder, because then you start having normal conversations with people fairly early on if you allow yourself to be in those situations. And I think it's knowing when to push yourself and when you're not quite ready. Like I was talking with somebody this morning, and we're organizing an event in Romanian, and I'm going to do a presentation, and that's scary. But I would not have done that last year, because I would have said, no, I can't, it's too much. But I think there's something about that really nice part of learning another language where you can get to the point where you can start to enjoy it. And I don't think I'll enjoy doing a presentation in Romanian. I mean, I think it's a great experience, and I'm looking forward to doing it and to meeting people and to sharing with them and to answering their questions, even though that's one of the hardest parts because you can't prepare for it. But I think there's something about those first stages of a new language that you have to kind of do the work. And it's not always fun. I enjoy it because from an intellectual point of view, I think it's interesting to see the structure, the patterns, how the language works.
But that's because we're grammar freaks. And this is the thing. When I think about people who come to me for mentoring, my first idea is to get away from that as much as possible in an open way, because people will be afraid of the word grammar, right? So people, when you say, the irregular verbs, it's like,
one of my students put that on LinkedIn, and how she had grammar sheets. I was like, please tell them that was your request, because otherwise you're going to scare away most of the potential customers.
Yeah, but I guess for freaks like us, it's exactly the opposite. I have this new experience now, because as I told you, this language thing is now taking over my life in even more than before. And I'm watching a show in Italian for the first time ever, right? I never did that. And all of a sudden, I'm like reverse learning. So I'm looking at the verbs and all of the grammar points and kind of trying to figure out what they are. So I'm going from what they are in applied, when they are applied, I'm going to reverse engineer to figure out where they belong grammar wise, right? So that's the exercise that I'm doing now.
So that's how you relax in the evening. That's how you...
So imagine watching TV with me. I mean, please.
No, I think it would be fascinating. We should do it
who wants that? But... No. It's just impossible, because I'm talking about grammar the whole time. Oh my God, I think this is the future now. Blah, blah, blah. So it's like... it's just getting to a ridiculous point. So it's
that's knowing yourself, and that's what a lot of people don't do. And I think maybe as somebody that's been working with languages or learning more languages, is the more you do it, the more you understand yourself, and that can be good, because you know the things that you need to work on more. With me, it's definitely speaking and having that confidence in the initial stages, because I don't. It's always like each new language personality is a really hard birth for me, because it's like hard work to get there. But then once I have, then I'm okay. Then I can start to enjoy it. Then I can talk to people. And of course, I still have more to learn. But I know that first bit is the hardest. And then once I'm through that, it's more fun.
That's why I consider that learning a language is an act of personal development, right? I can even imagine people like us doing it just because. So I guess it's like you have to know yourself so much better to have a better experience as a learner. So I guess this is one of the first things that people would need to establish, like to look at themselves and figure out what kind of learners they are, what they enjoy, what makes them feel excited, and all of that. Because if you don't look for the things that you enjoy and that you are excited about, then of course there are people who are super mechanical, and for them, as long as things make sense somehow, which in a language is not really
Good luck with that.
possible, right? So I think that that's what it is. You have to find like I always say, find the English speaker in you, because I mean, if you're here to learn, then it's there. It's something that wants to come out, right? It's something that wants to exist, is you as an English speaker. But you kind of have to know yourself to see where you're going to fit in as an English speaker. What kind of person are you in your own language to begin with, right? So that's, I think that's very relevant.
They'll develop.
Like, yeah, they have never looked at themselves and the way they operate in their own language. And I find it fascinating because, of course, this is one of the exercises that I do, because I'm a bit of a narcissist, as you know, and I love watching my own videos. So I guess it's something that people should cultivate, because you learn so much about yourself while you're looking at yourself speaking, because all of your personality and a lot of your features simply come out when you speak, even not even talking about foreign languages, just your own language. So what kind of person are you when you look at yourself speaking? How do you feel, right? But first you have to face the fear of exposing yourself, right, and doing it, and then being brave enough to actually watch yourself back, because a lot of people say, oh yeah, I do it, and then I never watch it back. I'm not like that. I watch it a lot. I mean, I love watching everything that I record, so I watch it constantly, and the idea is to get to know myself better, right? Sometimes I'm thinking that I'm someone else. I'm just observing this person, and I'll learn a lot about this person, but just checking out their materials and the way they express themselves when they are in a certain circumstance. So that's me.
Yeah, but I think that's important. It's also important to learn to get to know these other parts of you, because I don't know about you, but I think I have, well, 3 Kirstys plus 1 that is just beginning to come out.
Okay.
Each language, like
right,
every language, it's still me. It's not that I, have a different personality for each one, but I think certain things can come out about you, or you can feel more freedom to express parts of who you are, or you maybe sound different for 2 different reasons, whether it's like a confidence thing, because I do know that in the past people have said, oh, you people that know me and who don't speak Romanian, for example, oh, that didn't sound like you, because you were a lot more shy, which I'm not. But I'm not talking about that. I mean the real you that comes out in the other languages. Do you think there are more versions of you in that? Do you think that different parts come out more when you use different languages? Because there's Spanish as well, which you haven't touched on, but English,
my God,
Portuguese.
Yes, and it's like I love speaking Spanish, right? So there was no particular reason why Spanish was in my life, but I did Spanish in college, and that was something I've really wanted to do. And so it went great, and I loved it, and I had a lot of fun. But of course, I've used it in language work, obviously. But it's not like I thought that my Spanish was going to be a very active part of my life. But I was totally wrong, because then when I went to the States, given the fact that I was in Los Angeles for 5 years, and then went to San Francisco, and the Spanish was not as needed or as active, let's say that. But especially in those 5 years in Los Angeles, it was like I was speaking Spanish constantly. So I guess I spoke more Spanish than English in Los Angeles, which is a bit shocking, but that's what happened. So I learned it in college. I've always liked it. I've always enjoyed the sound a lot, exactly because it's so lively and it's so like me, I think. So I really enjoyed it. And so I went to the States, and immediately there were a lot of people from all sorts of Spanish speaking countries. And it was just a blast for me, because I learned so much from them. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden it became an active language for me, like big time. And then I came back from the States, and strangely enough, I immigrated to Spain. This was even more unexpected. And that is when I did not speak Spanish. Okay, I didn't speak Spanish on a regular basis, because I worked at a company where we would only speak English, basically. So because there were people from everywhere. But the thing is that I really enjoy it, and I love speaking, and I love the whole communication process, and I like the way that the words sound a lot. I think it has a lot to do with me. So I really identify with, you know, the loudness, I guess, of the whole thing, or how animated they are. This, all of those things really make sense to me. And I think this is why my relationship with French is a little bit more quiet, because maybe the language in itself, it's like very, I have the impression that it's a bit more refined and a bit more paused, and things that I'm not, right? But my dream is not necessarily to go back to my French, because I mean, my French exists in its form, in whatever it is. But it's true that I would love to one day go back to German and take it to another level, because somehow I also identify, maybe it's a more serious part of me that identifies with German, because I don't think it's the same kind of philosophy as with Spanish. But it's just that it intrigues me a lot, right? And I like the sound of it. I like music in German. I like, opera in German a lot. So I listen to the magic flute a lot. So the Zauberflute, I guess this is the way you say it, something like this. And I love it. I absolutely love it. So it would be more from that artistic point of view, I think it's really interesting to me. So maybe you have already told me that it would be a great idea for me also to talk to the people, the people in the mentoring sessions, to just explain that I'm actually going through a similar process too, because I was learning a language and all that. So I'm almost convinced.
I think it helps. I mean, you know what's going on in your life and what you have time for. But I think for me, it does help to be a learner as well, because then it's not just, theory that you learned on some course about teaching, or that you read in a book somewhere. It's actually, I'm living this, I'm doing this. And yeah, I know how it feels when you have to go and present something, or go and speak to someone, and you don't really feel like doing it, and you do it anyway, and then it feels good afterwards because you achieved something. You did something that you thought, oh, can I do that? Maybe. And if you find that you can, it encourages you to do something else that you didn't think you could do. I think it's constantly challenging yourself, and that's where the personal development comes in, because people who do the same things all the time, don't learn anything new, don't try anything new, are not developing themselves. It's comfortable,
I guess
but
it's a very deep thing. Your relationship with the language is just a very, very deep, very philosophical. That's the way I see it.
And it changes. It can change, and I mean, you can fall out of love with them as well. Like, I've had a couple of ones that I left behind on this journey of languages. I've always been really passionate about learning, especially learning languages, but there have been some that I abandoned. We just weren't compatible, and they had to leave. It's
Yes, I totally get that. Not that I didn't want to. This is, people who know me from college, they know that this is true. By chance, I was forced to having 2 years of Russian. So anyway, one day I'll tell that story. But anyway, the truth is that I had a lot of trouble because I just couldn't identify, right? And then I also did a small, short summer course for Hungarian. For some reason, that felt a little bit better. But the Russian affair just never took off. So sometimes people think, oh, it's amazing, you're good with languages, things like that.
Yeah.
I just don't see it that way. I don't consider that I'm good with languages. It's true that I like thinking about languages from multiple perspectives, but then for me to actually have a relationship, a deep relationship, because I only consider that I speak a language when I have a really, really deep relationship to that language, right? That I can basically express myself fully, let's say almost fully, because it's, languages are something that they will be here for your lifetime and more. You'll die and you still need to learn more. So it's not like I consider that I know this or that, because it's just, I know that it's a task that will last forever. And this is also a mystical thing about languages that I absolutely love. The fact that you're never done. It doesn't matter what language it is. If it's your language, any other language, it doesn't matter. If it's alive, then it will outlive you in every possible way, right? You cannot do anything about that. And that is just amazing, right? It's just that no matter what you do, you can dedicate your whole life to learning, even your mother tongue, in a most dedicated way, that you're never, ever, ever going to be remotely done. So isn't that magical?
It's liberating, isn't it? Because all these ideas that we tell ourselves, oh, you have to learn this, we have to be, I mean, people say to me, speak like a native speaker. What kind of native speaker? There are some native speakers that, you know.
And the fact that native speakers, I keep talking about this in the sessions, it's like native speakers make mistakes in their language.
Or just don't know how to express something. How many was it yesterday? I was saying to you, what is, you know, that's really bad English. How can I? But no, not that I'm an English teacher. But sometimes you just need a few minutes to, if it's something very personal, very complicated, you need to think.
Yes,
and
it's true. If it's emotional, if it's personal, all of that, and also then if it's specific, right? There's a lot of things. I told you the other day, I was going to tell you something about, you know, the life of saints and all of that, and I was like, oh, how do you even say that in English? And neither of us knew.
No. I genuinely didn't know, and you just hadn't thought about it before.
Yeah, but I've had this experience of doing things for the first time in the States, for example, like having a dog. I had never had a dog before, and then I had my first dog in the States. And then obviously I went to the vet for the first time in the States. I went to adopt a dog for the first time in the States, and all of those things, buy dog food, blah, 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 blah. So it's like, for me, it was only logical to talk about dogs in English, right? And all of a sudden I came to Portugal and I didn't have dogs, or I didn't have a dog, but then I had cats and all of that. And all of a sudden I found myself like not knowing how to talk about things because I didn't have the experience in Portuguese. And the opposite happened for, I always say it, for when I got to the States, people are like, yeah, but you didn't have any trouble because you could speak English. Yes, but I didn't know anything about the food, for example. That was a disaster. The first 3 months or so, I had a lot of trouble because of food, because I didn't understand what that meant. And you had all of those types of sauces, things that don't even remotely exist in Portugal, or maybe not.
I would have that trouble as you know, like from the UK, I would probably have the same problem because the language is the same, but what does that even mean? I don't know.
Yeah, vocabulary is this thing. People have the impression that they are good at languages because they know a lot of words, or they are terrible at languages because they don't have vocabulary. And that's just not a factor, because vocabulary is totally dependent on context, right? If you were not exposed to a certain context, or if you didn't fabricate that context while you were learning English or whatever you were learning, it's like if you've never been exposed to that vocabulary, you just cannot know it. It doesn't matter if it's your language or not. And people have the impression, oh my God, I really need more vocabulary for my English. Yes, but what are we talking about, really? Right? It's not like because you once tried to have a conversation about subject X and you didn't know anything about that. Even in your language, how could you know it in another language? But even if you know it in your language, or if you know it in another language, doesn't necessarily translate, because it doesn't mean that you know the same things in both languages, right? So I've had that experience and I find it fascinating. And I always have to give that information to people. It's not like because you know how to speak a language, you know all sorts of things about that language. It's not true. Our knowledge is always very limited. And that's what's amazing. And that's why it's unbelievable. And I'm always grateful to talk to other people who also, you know, teach or learn or whatever they're doing, because they will have a different perspective, because they will have a different experience with it.
And also language is changing. Like I've got some,
of course,
I know people who moved to live in another country, and they went through the lockdown, the pandemic there. And so then, but they didn't have any of the vocabulary to talk about that in their first language, because they weren't living in that country at the time.
Exactly.
And so all those words were missing, because the new words come, new words get added to our vocabulary because we need them more. But if you're not there where that's being spoken about, then you won't have them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's
and another thing is when people say, oh, you're good at languages, so it must be really easy for you. It's so easy. It's not. Even if people do think you're in quotes good at languages, you have to work at it. Maybe it's more enjoyable for people who enjoy the act of learning languages and communicating in other languages, but you still have to put the work in. It's not like you suddenly wake up one day and can speak fluently and you don't have any problems. It's ongoing. You have to keep trying and learning and working at it. Otherwise, you don't get anywhere.
And you have periods where you just feel very stuck, and then all of a sudden it's like a light bulb goes off, and then, you know, it comes and goes, and it depends on so many things. And then finding the circumstances to practice is another challenge, right? But people really have to, these days it's a bit easier, but you know, it's just, I almost found myself talking to the walls all the time because I needed to practice. So in the process, my brother ended up learning English super early because I was desperate for someone to practice with.
You didn't have a choice.
I didn't have a choice, and he didn't have a choice, because I mean, how could I talk to people who could speak English when I was 12 or 13 or whatever? There was no internet, and then yes, I had my Madonna songs, but she wouldn't talk back.
It's much easier now, like especially with my whole recent experiences of I've never I've been to Germany many times, but I've never been to Romania, and I've managed to. You have to be really disciplined, and I think it's harder. Like when I was I mean, we're kind of the same age, but when I was at school,
I'm older.
Yeah, a little bit older, but it's not much. I got letters from people in the post, but there was no emails, no, we have so many opportunities now, and I'm glad. But even so, this idea of you live in a country where the language is spoken, that doesn't work, because you can avoid speaking if you really want to. So whether you live in a country where the language is spoken or not, you have to be proactive. You have to look for people to speak with, even if you don't want to. You have to look for opportunities to use that language, and I think that's why it can't be like an isolated thing where you're just learning vocabulary, because if you don't understand the social situations that you find yourself in, or why something is said in a certain way, then your language is going to make you sound like a machine. You won't be able to build relationships, friendships with people, because it doesn't make sense.
That's why I watch reality shows. You know that, right? That's that's my trick. Yeah, that's how I try to keep my English fresh. The Kardashians and
it's educational. That's why you can find
for me, if you want to make it, the thing is, if when we talk about languages, if you want to make something educational, you can make it into an educational thing. You just manipulate it for your own purposes. That's what I did with my Madonna songs, right? I had crosswords, fill in the gaps exercises, all of these things I had with Madonna songs. You made
your own?
Yeah, of course. They didn't exist. Yeah, so we had to do that. And then later with my brother, he would say, where is the word blah 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 in a Madonna song? And you would have 3 seconds to come up with the name of the song. And all of these things, right, made us kind of be very aware of whatever vocabulary she was using. And that was kind of our basis to build on and to just develop our English.
I've got a language question and a general curiosity question from that. And I guess the general curiosity question wins. Do you remember the first song that you listened to, or the first song that you decided, right, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to become a fan, I'm going to find out more? Do you remember when that exactly?
Yes. I have a date and everything. It's pretty ridiculous. But this is a long story, but basically, so the kids, my brother, the first ever event was that we told our father that we wanted the tape from this blonde singer that everybody was talking about, blah, blah, blah. We meant Samantha Fox, but the Madonna album had just come out. The True Blue album had just come out, and then he identified the blonde famous singer that was always on TV as Madonna. So that's what happened. So he actually brought the Madonna tape for Christmas of 1986. That's what happened. My brother was only 3, and the kid wouldn't stop listening to that stuff. It wasn't me in the beginning. So he was just obsessed with that stuff, and especially Papa Don't Preach. He was just insane. And then in 1987, there was a Madonna movie called Who's That Girl? So it was a bit of a silly movie, but everybody wanted to watch the movie. And the kids in my street all said that they were going to watch it, but they didn't want me to go along because I was too noisy. They were sure that they would be expelled from the movie theater if I was there. So I got home and I told my father, how is this possible? They're going to watch this Madonna movie, but I cannot go because I'm too noisy, blah, blah, blah. My father said, I have no idea if they will go, but you are. So he just dropped me off. And this was October 25th, 1987. And so I got to the break. So there was a break in the movie, and I was so impressed with all the singing and all the moving around and all the silly stuff that she was doing that I vowed in that moment that I was going to be a Madonna fan forever, and that the first step would be to learn proper English and then to ask my father to buy all possible albums that were already out. And then, so that's how it all happened for the first time.
Isn't it good that he made sure that you were still able to do that, then, that it doesn't matter what the other kids were doing and saying?
Yeah, so that's why it was a pretty important event in my life, because it was something that people were finding excuses for me not to do, but my father was like, why would this be even a factor? And so that's it. Nobody went with me. They just dropped me off, and then they picked me up, and I felt like a grown-up going to the movies by myself for the first time, and all of those things happened. And then nobody expected me to be as obsessed as I became after that.
But also that you didn't listen to them. I mean, that's the other important thing there in that story, that you didn't let their behavior affect what you were going to do in the end.
Yeah,
because you went anyway.
Yeah, that was really good. And then the first time that Madonna released a proper album, because then she released other things in the middle, but a proper album was actually Like a Prayer. And that's obviously the song of my life, because you had the Pepsi commercial that was forbidden, and she was, there were demonstrations against her in Washington and all of those things with the supposed Black Christ and all of those things. So Madonna is that person that will feed you as a fan, right? So she had the movies, good or bad, it doesn't matter, a lot of tours, a lot of albums, very interesting videos and all of that. So I guess all of this contributed to my interest and love for both of them at the same time, English and Madonna. So I guess that's how it happened.
And that's why it works as well, like in terms of, I mean, it worked for you because it was just became part of who you were, part of how you live, but it also works because you've got that reason, that motivation that drives you to, like when you were a child, you wanted to learn more so you could understand the songs, so you could understand the movies. And that's,
yes, that was the first motivation, let's say. And then after that, I understood that I could do more with it. But that was my first motivation. Yeah.
To keep you going on the days when you're like, oh, I don't feel like that. But that's also, for me, that's where people come in, because for me, I try to make contacts or friends or people who speak the language, because I need that. I'm a social creature, and I need to have that input from people, because otherwise it's lonely. It doesn't matter if they're miles away, and most of my best friends are miles away, which is fun sometimes. But no, it's the human connection, which isn't dependent on distance, but it means that you have people who like a reason to speak that language, because this person speaks it, or because you want to understand this person's content, or because you want to communicate in that language with this person. And I think that for me it really helps, and for other people who feel like that as well, it makes it easier to learn if you have living reasons to learn, people who will interact with you and communicate with you, because that can give you the motivation to keep going. If you're having one of those plateau experiences where you feel that you're not really making progress, it can make you keep learning, because you want to be better for yourself, but also to make it easier to communicate with other people.
Yeah, and these days I use it for other purposes. So my my interest in spirit, my spiritual life and all of that, English is always at the forefront, because the authors I'm most interested in tend to be American for some reason. So for me, it's the gift that keeps on giving. There's always a reason, not only for work, obviously, because that's established, but it's like there's always a personal reason for me to continue to pursue the language and to try to work on my knowledge of the language. It, of course, these days comes in a more natural way, because whatever I'm doing, I'm always thinking about it. And I've talked to other people who work in the business, and they've told me that they have the same problem. They're watching something, and it's nothing. We don't do it on purpose. It's just immediately we're thinking about things from a linguistic perspective. But it's just that English for me, because of course it's not my mother tongue, has given me such opportunities and such freedom, I think, to pursue most of my interests or people I'm interested in, and whatever it is. It's just given me so much freedom. And this is how I see it. It has been some sort of my passport to the world, right? So that's why I'm so grateful for all this experience.
And that's what you want to share with others as well. It's done so much for you, so I guess you can help people on their journey now or they have to find it for themselves. You can't do it for someone else, but you can help them to find that way that's right for them. And yeah, I think that's another thing that sometimes people forget, that it's not just about work. I do a lot of courses with people who are interested in business English, partly because they have to. They don't have a choice. They're employed, and that's what they have to do. Some of it is self-employed people, business owners, and that they can see that it makes sense for them. But it doesn't always have to be about this business stuff. It can be, like you said, about the things that you're passionate about. And I guess that means also if you wanted to, I don't know, access events or courses, or so not just reading, but any other kind of content that was created in English, having that the ability that you have means that it's easy for you to do that, and so other people can as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole idea. It's just and then because all of those things are interesting to me, then it just keeps on happening. And why would I stop it? That's the big question.
And you never know where it's going to lead. Like anything with having other languages, like I thought I was done after 2 additional ones. Apparently I'm not. I didn't plan that. It happened. So now we have to see where that goes.
But you're very serious. You're very serious about your path in languages. It's, for me, it's a bit more like, I had already established long ago that I wasn't even gonna think about that. But now it's like I'm having a new approach on things, and I don't even do it on purpose. And it's like I'm interested in things like from that reverse engineering kind of perspective, and it's just happening naturally. So there's hope. There's hope.
For who? For you?
For me to go back and learn something, because for you, I mean, there's no need for hope. You're already doing it.
I don't know if I'm serious in the sense that, I don't like being incompetent at anything.
I know that.
I can accept that I'm incompetent at because I'm just not very good at them. And if I don't care about that, that's fine. But if I care about something, I don't enjoy feeling incompetent, and I want to get past that. And I don't know if we ever completely get past that. But for me, if I feel that I can begin to relax a bit, then I can
have resources, right? Because of course I need help with my English too. Come on. It's like, of course, sometimes I have to stop and ask, is this right? Is this wrong? What should I do here? Of course. And the same could happen in Portuguese, but it's just, it's just something that you already know. It's going to keep on happening. So you just have to live with it, and don't worry about being perfect or about being always right or whatever it is. It's not going to happen ever.
But you can be less frequently wrong, and that's why I mean.
Yes, that's right. You can, beyond communication, take your English or your language learning beyond communication and really speak the language. Be in the language. Be yourself in the language. This is really my goal.
Mine too. And that's why I can't kind of rest until I get to that point where I can at least see it coming. It might not be there fully, but I need to see it. And to get to know that personality in the other language, to be able to say something and not to think I'm just going to freeze because I don't know anything. If I don't know the words I need, I know other words, and I can keep the conversation going. I can explain something, even if it's not the explanation I give in English. It's
just to be free to rephrase, because obviously sometimes we start saying things in a specific way, and then you get to a point you're stuck. Just restart, and it's totally fine. That's what you do in your own language.
It's what you do, and it's what you do when you have more vocabulary to do that. So as soon as you start to get to that point where you can do that, then I think learning another language becomes a whole lot more interesting and exciting, because then you can explore new ideas with other people, and you can also let other people see who you are. And I think that's also really important, that if you're meeting people for the first time, sometimes it's good if they don't speak your first language. I need to find some people who don't speak English, and because it's too easy. And then if other people think, it'd be easy just to revert to English. But if you're a native English speaker, but it's good. One of the people that really helped me with German in the beginning didn't really speak much English at all, but she was patient and she listened, and we got there. And she did a lot for my confidence, because I realized she could understand me. I knew she wouldn't in English, and she knew that as well. So we stuck with it. We drank a lot of coffee, and we learned together. And I helped her as well, because she was visiting England and she couldn't really communicate otherwise. So it was a two-way thing, but she did a lot for me that time. But I think sometimes people don't always really get to know us at the beginning if we aren't ourselves, which is why it's another reason to try and be ourselves as quickly as possible, because then not everyone's going to like us. Some people won't, that's fine, but the decision is made on something that's truthful and authentic, and not just how much you were able to convey with the words that you had at the time.
But I think people are a bit more flexible, especially native speakers of a language. I always say it to everyone, just don't be so desperate and feel so insecure, because a native speaker of English or whatever will be a lot more flexible and understanding than you think. And they will also make an effort to understand where you're coming from. So even if something fails in the communication itself, don't worry so much. I mean, if people have any doubts, they will ask, or, you will clarify or whatever, but don't be so scared of talking or writing or any of that with especially native speakers. I think they're probably a little bit less strict than some of us who just know it as a second language because we've studied it, right? So we focus a lot on grammar, things like that. So sometimes I feel like we'll, as people who have learned language, we're a bit more of a grammar Nazi than most native speakers. I think I'm actually a bit more, open to trying to do my best to understand people, just because, I understand where they're coming from. I've also been in the position where I probably couldn't communicate in a certain language, right? When I started learning, of course, I couldn't communicate. I would just say things. But because of my age, in the case of English and all of those things, and your circumstances where you only have to speak at school and all of that, of course, that will give you some time in order to get acquainted with language. And then once you have to use it, which is like, I wonder when you have to use it for the first time. I mean, yes, of course, if people ask you for directions, something like that. But I remember the first interaction that I've ever had in English with a person who couldn't speak any Portuguese.
And how was it?
Well, it's a long story, but in the end, she was American and she was on vacation in the Algarve, but she was staying at my oldest uncle has a hotel business in the Algarve. And then because I talked about Madonna immediately when I saw that they were American, we started having a conversation about America and my love for Madonna and blah, 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 all the same story. But it was insane to me that it was happening, because I could see it, it was just materializing in front of me, just unbelievable. Because it's like you learn, but then how do you know what's happening? Because at school you don't really have that opportunity. It's not possible with all of those kids in the same room and the poor teacher, right? And so it's like all of a sudden you have to talk to someone who doesn't know a word of Portuguese, and you really want to make yourself understood because it's an important subject for you, right?
I think that's so funny that it was about Madonna first.
Yeah, of course. It's because I guess that was the thing that I would talk about, because I would feel comfortable about it, right? I guess it was the easiest way out, most probably, and also because she was American, and that called my attention because of the Madonna reference, right? It was not like anything else at that time. So it was just a magical thing to see it in front of you, that you actually could do it, right, with someone you had never seen.
And it goes both ways. I mean, I had that experience I was telling you about with the person that I was speaking with, and she didn't speak English, and that was great, because we had we helped each other, and it was a good experience. But when I went to Germany for the first time, so not the first time I used it, but we went to somewhere where there's a really strong regional accent. I didn't know that at the time, and I was really kind of sad when I went back to my hotel room. Like, people understand me, and I don't understand them. And then I ordered 3 coffees, and there were only 2 of us because somebody was coming. I didn't feel that I needed to explain that, but yes, I do want 3 coffees for the 2 people at this table. And so she only gave me 2 because she thought, she obviously doesn't know the difference between 2 and 3. And then I was upset about that as well. So I think I can't even get that right. But some of these early experiences, they happen. And in English, I would have just said, well, I ordered 3. Where's, can we have the other one, please? But when it's your other language, they, I must have done something wrong, or they didn't understand. But most of the time people aren't listening properly anyway. So we put so much pressure on ourselves sometimes as people who are using another language, especially at the beginning, that I've seen emails that people have written, and they said, my colleagues didn't understand us. There was nothing wrong with the email. They didn't read it properly, and that's on them. That's not on you, because you wrote the email. But I think sometimes we need to think all these interactions we have with people. That's just another part of the other person's day. It might be a big deal for us that we're speaking another language for the first time. But for them, it's just another part of their day. So if they aren't listening properly, or, it doesn't mean that we didn't do a good job. And most people aren't judging ourselves as harshly as we can judge ourselves if we're perfectionists. If we want to get everything right. I do that, surprisingly.
Yes, but, I know. I know you do that a lot.
People aren't paying attention.
But that's true. We just have to be more open and realize how natural all of this is, right? That making mistakes, using the wrong verb, the wrong word order, all of these things are just natural, because we have to remember that language is natural. It's born and it dies. So it's alive. It's a natural thing and it's totally alive. That's why it's called natural language, right? When we talk about languages that are spoken, we call them, from a linguistic point of view, natural languages. Because there are other languages, right? Obviously, that are artificial or otherwise, or just, languages that they make up for this or for that. But yeah, they're natural languages. They're just a product of being human. So we have to take them as flawed entities, just like us.
Yeah, and how many times do you have a misunderstanding with somebody when you're both speaking your first language?
Of course,
it's nothing to do with learning. It's just
exactly.
Human.
I keep on reminding things of those people of those things, right? About the problems, the communication problems that you have in your own language that have nothing to do with you think. It's preventing you from speaking another language, right? So there's other factors. And probably when you're speaking your second language or whatever language, foreign language, you are actually more careful.
Yeah.
Most probably. So probably there's less communication problems, but people don't see it that way. They feel like, why would I do this if I'm not sure? I'm not sure. It's okay if you're not sure. I also say things in Portuguese that I'm not sure of, I'm sure. It's just, I think we need to see it from that perspective, from the natural perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I could listen to you all day, but I guess we're going to have to stop at some point. But for those who are listening to the podcast, there will be more of us coming. We have plans for more things to do together, more joint projects, and I'm sure you'll see a lot more of us together in the future.
And I'm sure.
I will add your links to the show notes page as well. So if there's anything, your LinkedIn profile maybe will be a good one, and then or any other links that you want to add, we can talk about that because we haven't. But there'll be an opportunity for people to get in touch and to find out more about what you do and the services that you offer, and the podcast and the mentoring and all the other good stuff that you have to come.
Yeah. So thank you so much for another great conversation.
I know. You will be invited back. I think we haven't finished here, so there's more.
Will we ever? It's just natural.
What we do, apparently.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Until the next time.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.